quick. Here's a question no one has ever asked. Does the Temple of Poseidon have a relationship to price action of cryptocurrency? You heard that right. Buckle in, viewer, because this ride is going to be incredible. Now, let's add a bit of mystery to kick things off. Even more than that opener, we need digits. Just two numbers, 37.650200 and then 24.24600. We are going to need those two numbers shortly. You don't need to memorize them, but I'm going to put them on the screen for a very specific reason. This episode, wow, the waves are a little higher than usual for this episode. To ensure that you find your way to the bounty of the sea, be sure to tap that thumbs up button. And if the unusual side of the due diligence calls to you, like the sirens of yesteryear, tap that subscribe button. You see, viewer, there's just a lot to unpack in this video. There's even more to review. That's why in this episode, I put the time code in the description so that you can refer to the area that you are most interested in. If you're new to the channel and feel something unusual is happening, let me affirm that something very unusual is happening. In this episode, I'm going to show you a link between calendar days, price action, and celestial phenomena. It's truly an out of this world episode. This is Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host Poseidon, god of the sea, and in today's episode, a talking golden ticket to the moon. Speaking of moon, did you know the origin of Monday comes from the word for Luna? Meaning, yes, Monday is the moon day, literally the day of the moon. And if we're talking about the moon, there is something else that's very interesting. The moon has something called a phase. There are different moon phases. There's the full moon and the waning or waxing phases, the crescents, and the quarter. And you know, an important part of making the moon have a phase is the fact that the moon moves around the earth, but in relation to the sun. I'm not here to debate the waffle, flat earth, or hollow earth theories with you, viewer, but let us set aside those notions for a moment. Grant me that the moon is visible in the night jacuzzi because of a flaming barbecue pit in the sky, an enormous gaseous body called the sun. And you know what day of the week is named for the star of our solar system? Sunday, of course. It is not often remembered that Sunday is literally spelled S-U-N with the word day attached to it, like a trailer attached to Optimus Prime. Sunday is the day of the sun, and Monday, the day of the moon. Prepare to dive, my friend, because this episode is about to blow. And Monday, you see, the phases of the moon are interesting in human civilization, and that's because for hundreds, if not thousands of years, humankind has looked up to the moon and the stars, and wondered when Elon Musk would get us to Mars. The answer is as soon as Elon adds ANKR to Tesla. But until then, let's continue the journey, although that is an interesting thought experiment. Would Tesla benefit from ANKR? If so, how? A video for another time. In this video, we are talking about a calendar, the moon, and the sun. And do you remember those two numbers? 37.650200 and 24.024600. Those two numbers are specific, and if you have a background in reading maps, you already know what I'm about to say. Those two numbers are latitude and longitude, meaning the pixel coordinate on our planet that locates any specific person, place, or thing. I'll tell you what they map to. But first, let me tell you why we need these numbers. The phase of the moon depends on where you are at in the world. If you're at the North Pole, your view of the moon is entirely different than your view of the moon from, say, Singapore, Turkey, Mexico, or even El Salvador. Now, why this 37 and 24 number? Well, in order to identify what phase of the moon we are in, which I'll show you shortly why we need that, but in order to do that, we need to pick a place on the earth. A place on the earth that has special meaning. And you know what? What better place to do that than the Temple of Poseidon, which overlooks the sea. So those numbers, 37.650200 and 24.024600, are the coordinates of the Temple of Poseidon. Maybe one day I'll be able to visit the temple in person, but until then, let's keep going. If you jumped ahead, here's where we're at. We have the coordinates to the Temple of Poseidon, and are using that to calculate the phase of the moon or sun based on the day of the week. Now, why would we do that? Why go through this trouble? If you followed my prior episode on trading activity, you'll know that I identified something unusual in the data. Since the epoch date of December 25th of 2021, the day the UNDD token was born, and then forward to slightly after mid-January, there was a strange and less than obvious correlation between the calendar day of the week and the direction of the price. In fact, it was so strange they decided to conduct a public experiment, the results of which are in this episode. Before we get into that, let's finish up this moon segment because it is absolutely fascinating. Here's the stunning consideration. Is there some apparent correlation between the phase of the moon or sun relative to the temple of Poseidon and the trading activity of one of our cryptocurrencies under study? For the purposes of this script, I'm only publicly reviewing Dogecoin. For starters, covering the observation ebbs and flows of each cryptocurrency would make for a very, very long episode. And we're not here to look into the mechanics of each and every cryptocurrency in just one video. Instead, I'm here to make a case that there's something to be said about the mechanics of celestial activity and price action. Here's why I say that. If you take all the prices for Dogecoin and then line those up down to the minute for a celestial phenomenon I described earlier, and then compute two columns of data, say one for the sum of the opening prices and one for the close prices based on the celestial movement, what do you get? Okay, I just said a lot and I know I may have lost someone. So let me slow down and explain. Our first step is connecting the price that Dogecoin is trading at for a very specific minute of the day to a very specific phase of celestial phenomena. Here on the screen, I'm showing some of the raw result set. The reason why I'm doing that is to give you a sense of how the data is being paired. Now, I'll note here that in a recent community poll, that request was to avoid putting the raw data behind Patreon. So I'm evaluating other solutions. If the people do not want a Patreon, then that's fine by me. I have other unusual ideas that I'm working on. So going back to the data, what do you see? We see some dates, prices, phases, and you'll observe that I pair the data down to the minute. Someone might be wondering about potential road duplication and things of that nature. But remember, I am a mythological god of the sea coming to you in the form of a talking golden ticket. So let's just say I took care of those quirks. Now, taking this data, if you then pivot all of it into what's called a pivoted table, that is, you take this enormous list of data and then start aggregating it, what do you get? Well, you get what I show on the screen. A tabular list of data is pretty difficult to see any specific price action. After all, it is not clear if there's much of anything happening. So let's do this. If we add the sum of the opens and the sum of the closes, we are going to get a new, well, imaginary number, but a useful one. If you have a large amount of unsorted yet similar numbers, if you add the group numbers together, you get a general idea of a potential signal hidden in the data. For example, just looking at the tabular list here, there's not a very clear magnitude or direction. But if we add these two columns together, look at what happens. Just look at this chart that's formed. Now all of a sudden, we see something truly remarkable. At the end of the golden hour, in the month of January, the price action was the largest contained value, meaning the highest prices were found up to the end of the golden hour. We can see that because we just added together the open and close to get a hint about the overall price potential of each phase. In theory, you would expect the data to be flat and not curved at all, and yet that is not at all what is on the screen. Can I pause here to just restate all of this in a different way to share how incredibly mind-blowing this is? Even more if you connect back into the threads of history with soothsayers and astrologers and the pyramids of Egypt. Here it is. If we gaze out from the temple of Poseidon, looking at the phases of the moon and sun, the price action of Dogecoin is shown to be at its highest up to the end of the golden hour. Much wow indeed. Some of you may not be familiar with the golden hour, so allow me to explain. It's also known as the magic hour. Photographers use this special time of day for better photos, fishermen use this time of day for better fishing, and if you're a trader in crypto, well, maybe it's worth exploring this golden hour for you too. Even better, if you are a fan of this channel and subscribed and thumbs up this video, then you know that there's a strong bend towards all the weird, good, and amazing things of the 1980s. That's why it's so outstanding to connect the golden hour to that specific decade. And that's right, we're going to connect the golden hour to the 1980s, specifically through a medical connection, because it's pretty interesting. You see, quote, in the early 1980s, R. Adam Cowley, a U.S. military surgeon, popularized the term golden hour, words often used in trauma and emergency medicine settings. The term's origins lie in photography and reference the first hour of light after the sun rises and the last hour of light before sunset, end quote. So, where did the golden hour come from? Good question. Check this out. Quote, It was believed that once this time had lapsed, the risk of death or long-term complications will significantly increase. The concept of golden hour is derived from the French military World War I data. The doctors then believe that there's a golden hour between life and death. End quote. Interesting, right? I bring this all forward because the loose story behind the idea of a golden hour, it's derived from data. And that's what we did here in this video, and frankly all the videos. But today we demonstrate that the dogecoin does appear to have a tendency towards a higher price action by the end of the golden hour. Let us keep going. On the screen, if you notice this chart, I've been talking about this extremely large bar here. And yet, where there is a large value, there is also a short one. Did you notice this tiny bar here? It's called Nader. Not Raph Nader. No, I mean Nader. Nadir. And this is where, while assembling all the data in this script, I began to wonder if there were words for due diligence. This one will have to be up there. I might buy myself a cake. You see, the idea of a nadir has a very specific meaning. It is, quote, Latin for bottom of the sky, is one of the 4 major angles in the astrological birth chart and definitely the least talked about, end quote. The literal meaning of nadir is even more interesting. According to dictionary.com, it is the lowest point in the fortunes of a person or organization. So let me simplify down these 2 points before we continue to even more bewilderment. The highest price action was found during the end of the golden hour, and the lowest price action was found in nadir. Some would stop there, but on this channel, we are just getting started. You see, quote, the word nadir comes from the Arabic word for nazir, meaning opposite. It first appeared in English around the late 14th century, but it wasn't until 1793 that nadir came to refer to the lowest point or worst part of something, end quote. If you were to guess then, or speculate what the lowest points of the cycle are on the dataset, as you look at this incredible chart, just remember, this is all relative to the Temple of Poseidon. The recorded price action and the relationship to celestial phenomena, it's bonkers enough that I might have to find time to swim even deeper on this one with the others. After all, the Dogecoin data is intriguing, but Solana is even more so. It's what made the trading edge experiment a true success. Ready for that conversation? When it comes to recorded prices, it's time now to have a conversation about an experiment. To jog the old memory banks, let me replay to you the nature of the experiment. On Thursday of 1/26/2022, I released a video describing that note an odd pattern in the data. In an effort to tease out whether or not that data warranted even further analysis, I opted to conduct a public experiment. I would buy a handful of cryptos on Friday, January 28th, at or near the quote-unquote market close of 6 p.m. ETC, and then one day forward I would sell those cryptos at a profit or loss. There is a caveat here that is not intended to take into consideration local taxation or anything else, quote the fine print, end quote. Instead, this is a question: does day of the week functionally matter in your trading strategy? Because on the surface, it sure seems like it. And I learned a long time ago that theory and real-world experimentation ought to bring out powerful insights. And so, that's what I did. As you can see here on the screen, on the 28th, I posted the exact buy amounts I did on Friday. And on Saturday, I posted that exit completed, and the results would be reviewed after I performed a bit more analysis on them. So let's look at the data and see what we can learn. First, a quick recap. What I did is purchase 100 USD of 5 of the channel favorites: AMP, Algorand, ANKR, Doge, and Sol. I bought slightly off the specific time of market close, about an hour, due to some conflicting obligations. So that brings up a good point about what I'd like to call the quote fine print, end quote. So let's go over that. I did not have the technology to time the trade to the specific end of day. I was close, about an hour. Does the exact time make a difference? Well, the answer to that depends on your view of the material I covered earlier, linking time of day to certain celestial events and showing how price action moves. That chart is on the screen again. Second, I did not cover broker fees. If you are fortunate enough to not have to pay fees to the exchange, then congratulations. If you are like most people, you do pay a certain fee to perform a buy or sell of a trade. And if we're talking fees, we should also give a nod to a vast problem in the crypto landscape, the dreaded T word. Third are taxes. You know, the government wants their cut. Which government? All of them. I'm not here to debate politics or whatever country wants their take of your haul, but just know that you should always be mindful of the tax implications of trading. That would conclude the fine print. So now as we look at the data, what are we seeing here? First off, let's get to the result. Did the trade produce a profit? If you jump to this time code to identify if the trade produced a profit, the answer is yes. Yes, it did. The actual percentage return was 0.71%. Now, if you're here, then you should know that this percentage of return is completely ignorant of what I call the fine print that I covered earlier. Let's go over some weird and interesting things in the data. The first interesting thing is if you add together the average fill price of all the assets that were part of the experiment, you end up with a number very close to the experiment's buy-in price per asset. That is, in the experiment, I put 100 on 5 different symbols. And yet, as shown here in this table, if you have the total fill values, that number, it ends up being close to 100. Curious and totally unexpected. A key lesson here on ANKR, which I'm sure my ANKR fans will appreciate. Well, it's this. It boils down to the following trading strategy. Only buy, never sell. There we go. So clearly I made a mistake selling my ANKR. A third takeaway is that there's an unexpected benefit to holding algo. Or at least I forgot about it. If you buy algo and hold it, you get a daily algo payment. Should I have included that daily payment in my return? The viewer is encouraged to build their own spreadsheet on that one. If I had included the algo payment, then depending on the hold time, the total return might have been even higher. And something I encourage you to think strategically about. The return on these tokens isn't in your native currency. It's a return on that asset. So if you are in a volatile asset that tends to appreciate in value faster than your currency, it's what I would consider worthy of one's greater attention. This one experiment sure seems to validate my Thursday video on what day of the week one should buy in on and when to sell, and it even more gives you a strategic option for when to sell. Meaning the theory was buying on the theoretical market close on a Friday, and then selling on a Saturday confers a slight trading edge. And you know what? I'd consider a 0.71% return a slight trading edge. There's even more data that I've captured, but we are up on time. Let me give you something to think about as we close out. I captured prices through the day, and there were times in the experiment where the return was much higher. However, the trade exit was planned for a 24-hour window. Yet, that window was intended to be precisely at a relative market close, so to speak. Would that have shifted the price action enough to erase the trading edge? Or is it the case that the trading edge would have clipped up another point or two? Really, it seems to all be a function of time of day and day of the week. And no matter what day it is, I do know this. This is Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host Poseidon, god of the sea. In this episode, we looked out to the celestial heavens from the Temple of Poseidon and observed the intersection of price action to celestial bodies. Is there a viable trading edge hidden away in these signals? Perhaps, but the fine print can cause you a lot of pain if you don't plan for it. Make waves, my friend.